President Joe Biden says he intends to keep his campaign trail promise to nominate a black woman to the Supreme Court and should announce his pick by the end of February. Now, of course, a number of names have already been named to the proverbial shortlist, and if one of them is confirmed by the Senate, she would make history as the first black woman to serve on the highest court. Joining us to talk about this and more are Sadale Malaku, an assistant professor of management at Baruch College and author of, quote, "You Don't Look Like a Lawyer, Black Women and Systemic Gendered Racism." Corey Carew, Chief Inclusion and Diversity Officer at Seyfarth Shaw, and Audra Wilson, President and CEO of the Shriver Center on Poverty Law. Thanks to you all for joining us. Sadale, let's start with you, please. What does this promise mean in a legal world that we know is statistically mostly male and white?
This is such an important moment for us. To have a Black woman sit on the Supreme Court is to publicly say that we have been excluded, right? And to provide access, opportunity for other women, and specifically Black women, to enter into this space. I think Biden is making a bold move here, but one that should have been done decades ago, right? And we see this in terms of what he's done previously to elevate Black women within the court. So I think that we need to continue to be supportive and vocal about what this means with respect to Black women's access to opportunity.
Audra Wilson, what's your reaction to this promise?
Same as Sadale. I think it's long overdue. There have been milestones that have been met, even having a Black male, but to be going this long before we've had a Black woman appointed to me is unconscionable. But what I'm happy to see is not only that President Biden has made this decision to make this nomination, but to see just the depth that he has to choose from. The people who are on the short list are formidable, and it's so exciting and wonderful to see. And it's important for our nation to see just how rich the pool of jurists, especially of Black female jurists, there are to be selected.
Corey, talk to us a bit about some of the systemic and structural obstacles that Black women face in the legal industry.
Thank you. That's an excellent question because, obviously that's part of why this moment is so incredible. Black women face a lot of obstacles in the legal profession. We often talk about this concept of intersectionality and how for Black women, the gender obstacles are not just gender plus race, but there's this double whammy that has an exponential impact on their careers, whether it's the impact of bias, the lack of sponsorship, the lack of mentorship, the lack of opportunities and visibility to those developmentally rich opportunities that allow them to thrive and move within our organizations, the lack of a sense of belonging and inclusion. All of these are factors that impact the progress of Black women in the legal profession and the movement that we see away from law firms into the public sector, into government, into nonprofit, and even to the corporate sector where our clients are. So those are just some of the obstacles that Black women face, but incredibly, they continue to persevere, in comparison to a lot of other demographics that leave the practice of law when they face gender obstacles. Black women tend to remain in the profession, even if they move out of law firms.
Audra, Corey, I think just kind of mentioned this a little bit, but talk to us about the importance of mentorship in this industry. Audra?
Mentorship is critical. I'll go first.
Go ahead.
Right. Here's a common statement. We are over-mentored and under-sponsored. So quite frankly, mentorship and the lack of mentorship is an obstacle for Black women. However, even when we are mentored, we don't have that sponsorship. And the sponsorship is the key component to success, where there are people with influence and relational capital that can talk about you, can recommend you, can mention your name in the rooms where you cannot be in. And that is a key part of advancement for everyone. And Black women tend to not have enough sponsorship within their organizations. Audra, what would you add?
I would agree with that wholeheartedly, that it has to be about that sponsorship. The other thing that I was very concerned about in my past life, I was actually Director of Diversity, Education, and Outreach at Northwestern Law. And one of the things that I focused on there was really, when we talk about pipeline, it's not just about attracting and getting more people of color, and whether it's Black women, Black males, any sort of people of color, but supporting them all the way through law school, making sure that they're able to pass the bar, and then establishing a pipeline for them, whether they're going to firms or different tracks. As we've talked about, it's not exclusively a firm track. And it's that sort of support that is really integral to their success, because this is not just a numbers game of having more people of color to occupy traditionally homogenous spaces, but making sure that we're meaningfully integrated. So we need that support, and I'll use the word mentorship in this sense, more so than any other group, because it's if without that, people will fall off and they won't be able to make it through. So that is something that I think is very important, that we're thinking about mentorship in a much broader context. And it starts from very early on, and it lasts even once people have passed the bar and they're beginning to practice.
Sadale, whoever his pick should be for the nomination, what kind of path to confirmation do you expect for her?
I think that, like all things, and with respect to Black women in particular in white space, right, there's definitely going to be a lot of challenges ahead. And as Corey and Audra have mentioned, we're looking at various obstacles that Black women are having to mitigate within organizations, whether that's appearance, right? Looking professional, being perceived as professional competence, right? The idea that many of the nominees are currently having to battle narratives around their accomplishments, right? Whether they're good enough and what that actually looks like in terms of how they're going to be able to do the work that's necessary, right? So I think a lot of the women, whoever ends up in this space in particular, is going to face challenges that they have always been facing. It's not going to be new. It's going to be even more difficult, I believe, in those spaces to do the hard work that they've already been doing. But I think just with respect to that sponsorship, right? Being sponsored in this way is what is going to give them the power to be able to do their work to the best of their ability with the support that they need. And no matter where they end up, any of these amazingly credentialed women, right, hands down, they are going to have the support of so many professionals of all races who are looking specifically to see this happen, right? And I think we need to think about that as well.
Audra, some of the criticism, from the right has been that this is another form of affirmative action. What's your reaction to that?
So, Brenda, I will tell you unequivocally that I think that is extraordinarily offensive. One of the most difficult things about hearing this announcement from President Biden wanting to support a Black woman was this proclamation that, I'm appointing a Black woman, because there were some people out there who thought, well, it automatically presumed that there is a question of qualifications. Does this person belong? Are we giving a handout to someone who wouldn't otherwise be deserving? The fact that we're not even given the benefit of the doubt, that the president would not make a nomination of someone who was more than worthy. If you look at the credentials of many of the women on this, actually all of the women, quite frankly, on this short list, they quite frankly outrival that of many of their white counterparts. They are stellar. And yet and still, there is a presumption that when the president says, I would like to rectify this wrong and have this representation on the court, that people automatically default to a place of somehow they didn't belong in the first place. So it is extraordinarily offensive. And I think it needs to be called out for what it is, and it is racist.
Okay, something that we'll all keep an eye out over the next month as we await the president's decision. Until then, my thanks to Sadale Malaku, Corey Carew, and Audra Wilson for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.